Hello and welcome to a Tuesday live right here on the early line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. That includes sportsgrid.com/watch, where you can find your favorite destination and consume everything all across the grid. He is Joe Raineri. I am Ben Stevens. We are here together on this Tuesday up until 11 a.m. Eastern Time to look back on the conclusion of week number 10 of this 2024 National Football League season. The second half now officially 1 week underway, and a Monday Night Football finale out in Los Angeles. An impactful game for both teams, squaring off inside SoFi, the Dolphins and the Rams. And where the rest of the NFL stands entering week number 11 in some critical games, all action to break down, as well as the second week of the season is now here. So much, Joe, over these 3 hours up until 11 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, and then the old proverbial Kansas-Michigan State college hoops game, which signifies to everyone it is back, Ben. It is that time of year, and I can't wait for it.
The Champions Classic tonight in Atlanta, Georgia. Michigan State and Kansas, and two more Blue Bloods. Duke and the young freshman taking on Mark Pope and his Kentucky Wildcats. Sean Rothstein will join us later in the show to preview everything you need to know for this monumental Tuesday in college hoops and our second reveal of the college football playoff rankings here in the 12-team era and in 2024. All right, let's look back on a Monday Night Football finale to week number 10 of this 2024 NFL season. A game, Joe, that both teams really desperately needed last night in Los Angeles. The Rams trying to win their fourth consecutive game to get above 500. The Dolphins holding on to a sliver of hope for the remainder of this season. And that hope might be just a bit bigger on this Tuesday morning. Miami's defense holds down L.A. 23-15 in Tua Tagovailoa, and Tyreek Hill and the Fins offense does just enough. Still swimming is well said. Miami wins outright as a 2.5-point underdog in Los Angeles, 23-15.
Turns out there is a pulse there, Ben, but if you're the Rams, 3 of 12 on third down, 0 of 3 in the red zone, and not to score a single touchdown at home, not a good look, LA Rams, in that NFC Western division, but great win by Miami. Now we'll just see if they can start piling up a few of these wins here.
You know what is fascinating, Joe, when you look back at last night? It was the 19th game for the Dolphins as an underdog with Mike McDaniel as their head coach. It was just their fourth outright win, and it was desperately needed to snap a 3-game skid. Miami still a lot of work to do to even be in playoff contention. But as we know, the back half of the AFC, not all that elite this year. Miami now 3-6. LA falls back to a game below 500 at 4-5. Plenty more from Monday in just a moment. But of course, as 1 week in the NFL ends, it gives us a chance to reset after the Sunday slate and look forward. The Chicago Bears need to look forward with a new coaching staff, but as of this moment, it is not happening. Matt Eberflus will remain as the head coach. He teases change within the organization, but not at quarterback? What? Matt Eberflus yesterday, Joe, as we shared at the end of the show, was on a local Chicago radio show, and his call dropped 3 times as he was being interviewed, which led to one of the hosts joking that, Coach, your cell phone connection is as bad, if not worse, than our offense. And that's saying something. I know the Bears are unlikely to make a midseason move, but they should.
I was hoping he'd be talking about himself and maybe stepping down, but I guess if that's not the option, why not Shane Waldron, who I think we can all agree upon is probably the single worst offensive coordinator hire that we have seen in a very long time around the NFL. Nobody thought this guy would make a great OC except the Chicago Bears, and this is what they're getting, and they deserve every minute of it.
3 straight losses. The coaching staff is actively holding back a young superstar or perhaps potential superstar talent quarterback in Caleb Williams and a very talented roster. The Bears, a 6.5-point home underdog at Soldier Field on Sunday against who? The bitter rivals, the Green Bay Packers. If you wanted to see it get worse, there's your golden platter on Sunday afternoon. The Giants not necessarily making a change at the quarterback spot, but head coach Brian Daboll not also necessarily committing to Daniel Jones as the G-Men starter moving forward. New York on the bye this week after returning from Munich and losing in overtime to the Panthers.
Yeah, and what's the choice here, though? New York, I mean, you're paying the guy. Who are we kidding, Daboll? You're playing him. As long as he's healthy and collecting a check, the Mara family is going to tell you one thing and one thing only, and that is to play Danny Dimes. Now, I get you don't want to go in front of the New York media and be like, oh, no, it's we're sticking with him, but the reality is you're sticking with him if he's healthy. Ben, what choice do they have?
Yeah, listen, the contract and the guaranteed money is done after this year. That's the hope on the horizon. Drew Lock, maybe. I don't really know. It's a disaster for the New York Giants. They're already thinking about 2025. Now to the NBA. Only 5 games yesterday as the league prepares for the second annual IST in-season tournament. And the best team in the NBA stays perfect. The Cleveland Cavaliers off to a historic 12-0 start, beating the Bulls in Chicago last night, 119-113. The Cavaliers did not cover as an 8-point road favorite, but Joe, they have covered in 8 of their 12 wins to start this year, and most importantly, the Cavaliers are still perfect.
Yeah, listen, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, folks. So, don't be running to the window to get in front of this Cavaliers train because they are playing tremendous complimentary basketball, team basketball. And for whatever reason, Ben, seems like maybe a coaching change there seems to have done the right thing with Coach Atkinson's got these guys believing, and we'll see how long it can last, though. That's the truth.
Kenny Atkinson is hopefully that difference maker for Cleveland. Good in the regular season with J.B. Bickerstaff, falling in the postseason. They have scored at least 110, has Cleveland, in 11 of 12 games, but last night's total of 237, a lofty number, does stay under. First game for OKC without Chet Holmgren for the foreseeable future. No issue. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the tallest player, by the way, in the Thunder starting 5 yesterday, goes off for a career-best 45 points as OKC picks up a big victory at home over the Clippers.
No Chet Holmgren, less defense with the Thunder. They're going to be going way smaller and way more up-tempo. Look at the overs for OKC moving forward, folks.
217 and a hook, 218 and a half even at its close does Sky over. College basketball, AP top 25 for the second full week of this year. Gonzaga and Auburn now in the top 25.
Yeah, and well-deserved for both here. But again, as we all know, plenty of time to go in college basketball. That list will look different.
Plenty, and a bunch of top 25 teams in action. We'll look back on that in just a bit. But, of course, Gonzaga and Auburn, 2 huge wins in the opening week. Auburn against Houston, a scrappy bunch, wink, wink. And Gonzaga, of course, beating Baylor last week on the opening night of the year. The finalists have been revealed for the Major League Baseball awards. Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani in contention for their league MVP awards. And Paul Skeens certainly in the running to be Rookie of the Year in the National League at bare minimum.
Yes, and yes. They're all pulling down some award here, Ben, I think.
Yes, and when the finalists then get the award, we'll obviously let you know that news as well. Monday Night Football finale in Los Angeles for week number 10. A recap of the Dolphins' win over the Rams next.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid. The Seahawks, I expected a bounce back after that poor performance against Buffalo the week before. They took the Rams right down to the wire.
The Cardinals are the top spot at the moment. That's not going to hold. Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are not going to win this division, but they are 5-4. After that, you've got the Rams, the Niners, each 4-4. The Niners, God willing, man. I mean, if Christian McCaffrey ever does come back.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Grandma Bear, who owns the football team, probably comes in, gives a little, oh, man, you're such a good little boy out there. Congratulations, the way you coach this football team. I'm never going to fire you.
Totally, I missed you pinching your own cheeks as I was looking down and did not know we were getting.
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there with that guy named Ben. Like, that's what your grandma would do to you when he goes here on Thanksgiving or Christmas,
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Monday Night Football, a finale to week number 10 of this 2024 NFL season. The second half, the first week of the final half of this year, now officially in the books, and a crucial game on a Monday night inside SoFi Stadium out in Los Angeles between the Rams and the Dolphins. LA had won 3 straight games to get back to an even 500, resurrecting their season. Miami in a 2-6 hole, but where health has been the main concern for the Dolphins, and mainly quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, they had looked so much better in the previous 2 weeks entering the Monday night finale. And it turns out that better offense was matched by an elite defense last night as the Dolphins go into the City of Angels and win outright as a 2.5-point underdog, 23-15. Lofty total for a primetime game of 48.5 stays well under by double digits. The Dolphins defense, Joe, really the reason Miami was able to snap its 3-game skid and keep just a little bit of hope left for the remainder of 2024.
Yeah, it was a little bit shocking that full complement on the Rams offensively was available to Stafford. Having Nakua and Kupp and company available to them, and yet they not be able to do pretty much anything. I mean, they both racked up some yards, but neither of those wide receivers felt like they played any sort of big role. I mean, if you don't score a touchdown. And I know Miami's defense doesn't get a lot of credit because of all the L's that they've been racking up, because offensively they've been a mess, but they were a top 10 ranked unit there, Ben, in terms of total yards allowed per game. They were only allowing about 300 yards a game. And I think they allowed, 327 last night, but they didn't give up a touchdown and they forced 2 turnovers. Yeah. So give credit to the Miami defense for showing up. I still wasn't particularly impressed with the Dolphins offense. But it was good enough when the Rams just kept kind of shooting themselves in the foot and did not look in sync at all. Little shocked from a McVay coach team at this point that's what we would get in a very tight NFC West race that the Rams are very much a part of right now.
An important game for the Rams because had they won to make it 4 consecutive victories, along with San Francisco, they would have been 5-4. Arizona atop the NFC West at this moment at 6-4. The Rams now desperately trying to keep pace. And Joe, entering the year, we thought the AFC would be the gauntlet of a conference in the National Football League. In fact, it's the NFC where a very large winning record, multiple games above 500, is going to be necessary to even flirt with a wild card berth to the postseason, which does then lead to a little bit of hope for the Dolphins because the back half of the AFC is not all that strong this year. And, Joe, it's always really interesting when you stare at box scores and you look at the play-by-play chart. You don't really get the sense of a game flow, but you can follow how the contest mostly played out. And it's always fun to read into and just make a blanket statement. Does not tell the entire narrative of a game. But if I were to tell you, the Rams scored on 5 of their final 6 possessions, and on the only non-scoring possession, it was just a missed field goal, so they had an opportunity in Dolphins territory. You would have said, did they score 40-plus points and beat the Dolphins by 20-plus? No, because all 5 scores were a Joshua Carty field goal, the rookie kicker out of Stanford. Regardless of what Matthew Stafford and Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp were able to muster up in terms of yardage offensively, they could not find the end zone. Miami bent at times, but the Dolphins D certainly did not break. To me, that was the story of Monday night.
But again, when you fail to find the end zone in 3 red zone opportunities, and really, Ben, they didn't convert a third down until the second half. So, and this is all while Stafford and company there, I mean, Nacua and Cooper Kupp had been, when all together healthy and playing, 8-3, averaging nearly 28 points a game, almost 400 yards of total offense. They scored 15, no touchdowns, had 327 yards of offense, and Nacua almost went for 100 yards, and Kupp had 80, and they still couldn't find the end zone. So I think that tells you just how good Miami was when it mattered the most in downs and situational football last night. Give credit to the Dolphins defense, who did more than enough to be able to give their offense a chance to win the game, and that's exactly what they did.
And Miami's best offensive possession was its very first. 5 plays, 70 yards, less than 3 minutes. They looked like that offensive wagon that we had seen last year under Mike McDaniel. They slowed up. They turned the football over a few times. Tua Tagovailoa, a couple of questionable decisions. But as Sean McVay told the reporter, Lisa Salters, last night out of the halftime break, the Rams continue to shoot themselves in the foot, and we saw that on display for all 4 quarters. There was a couple of times, Joe, that I thought L.A. could have gone for it on 4th down deep in Dolphins territory to be a little bit aggressive, knowing that field goals when you were down by double digits weren't necessarily going to change the tide of the game, even if you were able to convert. For instance, their second to last drive, they were down 20-9. They got it down to Miami's 4-yard line on 4th and goal. Actually, 3rd and goal from the 4, and then 4th and goal. And on 4th and goal, Sean McVay decided to just kick the field goal. So again, a rather sloppy game between the 2, turnovers on either side. But for the Dolphins, huge game. Huge game, Joe, because as we said in the preview of it yesterday, 2.5-point spread didn't matter much for Miami. The Dolphins did cover last week as an underdog in Western New York against Buffalo. 3rd consecutive game for the Fins, by the way, scoring more than 20 points. When in their opening 6 games of the year, they did not break through the 20-point margin. But, Joe, one of the biggest issues that Mike McDaniel has displayed as the head coach of Miami is doing more with less. Whether Tua Tagovailoa has been injured or even Tua is there against better teams and the Fins have been booked as a dog, they entered last night just 7-11 against the spread as an underdog, 3-15 straight up. They got their 4th outright victory last night, and it was crucial.
Yeah, it was. And listen, the MO for McDaniels in Miami has beat the weak teams to a pulp, stack all and pad all the stats that there is, and then disappear when you play the better team. So I give the credit to the defense last night, but my goodness, where is Miami going with this offense, Ben?
And that's the question, Joe. Tyreek Hill did find pay dirt for the first time since the season opener. What is Miami's outlook? Still 3 games below 500? Find out next.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. Ready? I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The Seahawks, I expected a bounce back after that poor performance against Buffalo the week before. They took the Rams right down to the wire.
The Cardinals are the top spot at the that's not going to hold. Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are not going to win this division, but they are 5-4. After that, you've got the Rams, the Niners, each 4-4. The Niners, God willing, man. I mean, if Christian McCaffrey ever does come back.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Grandma Bear, who owns the football team, probably comes in, gives a little, oh, man, you're such a good little boy out there. Congratulations, the way you coach this football team. I'm never going to fire you.
Totally, I missed you pinching your own cheek as I was looking down and did not know we were getting.
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there with that guy named Ben. Like, that's what your grandma would do to you when you go see her on Thanksgiving or Christmas,
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Week number 10, the start of the second half of the 2024 NFL season, now in the books. So at the end of the 10th week, in the Monday Night Football finale in LA between the Rams and the Dolphins, the updated outlook for both Miami and LA. Let's start with the winners, the victorious side, that being the Fins. Joe, although a win last night outright as an underdog to snap a 3-game slide in a much-needed, perhaps even must-win type of environment for Miami, still a very large hole to crawl out of at 3-6 through 10 weeks. Only two teams that entered the second half of a year 2-6 since 1990 have seen the postseason. And as we learned on the broadcast, both of those clubs did so by winning a weak division. The AFC East is not weak. Buffalo is 8-2 atop the AFC East at this moment. So again, you see the updated outlook. Miami is still 3 games south of 500, 7.5 the win total, but a plus 280 price for the Fins to make the playoffs. There is a sliver of hope, perhaps optimism, Joe, but you give us the sense of South Florida. How optimistic should the Dolphins be feeling right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've got a couple of more winnable games coming up here. I think they come home to take on the 2-win Raiders, and they should have no problem winning a few more games. That 7.5, I think, is an interesting number when you look at after the Raiders. They got New England, very winnable, but then they got to go to Green Bay. Then they got the Jets. Then they got Houston, San Francisco, Cleveland, and the Jets. So can they get to over 7.5? They're going to have to win one of those games we don't think they're going to be a favorite at, like Green Bay, Houston, or San Francisco. But 2 against the Jets, 1 against Cleveland. New England, yes, they should have at least another win with the Raiders, and New England after that. What does that put them at? 5 wins? That means they got to win 2 more games there, or 3 more games of the remaining 4, and that's going to be tough with that schedule.
Yeah, it certainly is. They are a 7.5-point home favorite against the stumbling Las Vegas Raiders, who are coming out of their bye this upcoming Sunday in Week 11. 3-6, 8 games remaining for Miami to even flirt with playoff contention. You would think at bare minimum they need to win 6 of their final 8 to get above 500 at 9-8. But Joe, as we have said throughout this season, became pretty evident about a month and a half into the year with teams like the Dolphins and the Jets and the Jaguars all struggling, where you thought they would be the wild card contenders in the National Football League, even the Bengals, who are below 500. Right now, when you look around the AFC, still, as you count them all up, there are 6 and only 6 teams that are above 500. 500. The Broncos are 5-5 now after dropping 2 straight. The Bengals still 2 games below 500. The Colts have fallen back to 4-6. So there is a path for the Dolphins just because of how relatively weak the AFC has been. So I guess some optimism for teams like the Finns, like the Jets, like the Bengals, although I don't believe the New York Jets are a playoff team. Not the same story, though, Joe, in the NFC. Many more teams above 500 contending for divisions, but if they lose out on winning a divisional crown, then, hey, here's a wild card berth. So if the Rams flirt with 500 or even stay below, there's no chance that LA is going to be a playoff team. Felt optimistic after winning 3 straight, entering Week 10, and being a slight home favorite against Miami. Now you see that playoff number plus 470.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's going to be some rough sledding for the Rams because they still got at least they have everyone that they need to beat in front of them in their own division, right? They needed to win that game last night. They'd have been sitting really pretty had they won that game last night at home against Miami. Unfortunately, now they're going to have to regroup and start putting some wins together here, but they still will play the guys they got to beat in front of them here coming up. So they still somewhat control their destiny, which is really what you're hoping for as you head into Week 11.
That 9-1 number to win the NFC West might actually be your best plus money price of an outside shot for Matthew Stafford and the Rams to be in the postseason. They already have a loss to the Cardinals, but a win against San Francisco and a win against Seattle. That means their final 3 games against those 3 teams in division still to come. On the road in New England this upcoming Sunday, the Rams, as I try to find that number here very quickly, are going to be, where is that number? A 4.5-point road favorite in Foxborough. Plenty more around the NFL comes your way as we go around the league next.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. Ready? I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The Seahawks, I expected a bounce back after that poor performance against Buffalo the week before. They took the Rams right down to the wire.
The Cardinals are the top spot at the that's not going to hold. Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are not going to win this division, but they are 5-4. After that, you've got the Rams, the Niners, each 4-4. The Niners, God willing, man. I mean, if Christian McCaffrey ever does come back.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Grandma Bear, who owns the football team, probably comes in, gives a little, oh, man, you're such a good little boy out there. Congratulations, the way you coach this football team. I'm never going to fire you.
Totally, I missed you pinching your own cheeks as I was looking down and did not know we were getting.
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there with that guy named Ben. Like, that's what your grandma would do to you when you go see her on Thanksgiving or Christmas,
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid. It is a Tuesday, week number 10 of the NFL now in the books after the Monday Night Football finale in L.A. The Dolphins victorious outright as an underdog. 1 week closes. We start a new week on the horizon. Week number 11 is awesome. So many significant and impactful games from the very jump, which is Thursday night, an NFC East battle between the Eagles and the Commanders. But before we get to that, all the news you need, the decisions that are made entering a new weekend and Sunday slate. Shane Steichen telling reporters that the Colts are sticking with Joe Flacco as their quarterback for Sunday's game at MetLife Stadium against the New York Jets. Gang Green, somehow, some way, Raineri booked as a 3.5-point home favorite. Flacco now in 4 starts, whether it was injury to Anthony Richardson or just the decision to make Flacco the starter because the Colts believe they have a playoff caliber roster. Flacco is just 1-3 straight up in his 4 starts for Indianapolis this season.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, they had some opportunities in that game yesterday. Well, I put it against Buffalo, but would I put it all on Flacco's shoulders? No. I think the numbers, the analytics have been run, Ben, and the Saber metrics or whatever else you want to look at. Flacco gives this team the best chance at winning enough games to make the playoffs, and that appears to be what the organization is concentrating on. It is not concentrating on the development of Anthony Richardson, who they burned a top, 4 pick on somewhere along those lines. So they're not interested in doing that right now. They're interested in making a playoff run. And as crazy as it is, Flacco gives them the best chance at doing that, Ben, and that's what they're going to stick to.
Sure, I guess, Joe, the results have not been there to back up that statement. I would agree, though, with the thought process. Anthony Richardson is a development piece. And again, I said this at the time that he was benched, and the unfortunate reality for AR's career and really Indianapolis as a franchise. Last year should have been the year that Anthony Richardson developed in the NFL and took that next step and took his lumps and played through the pain. Sadly, he only played in 4 games, only 2 complete because of the shoulder injury that sidelined him for most of his rookie season. Because at Florida, he did not have a lot of pedigree. He had 1 full year as a starter and at a 53.8% completion percentage. That's below average by college quarterback standards, and that does not get better taking the step against the best of the best in the NFL. But because AR was out, and Shane Steichen is a good coach, and Gardner Minshew is reliable, and Indianapolis, with talent on the roster, was on the brink of a divisional crown, now the Colts fan base and roster gets a taste for winning football and success. And when Anthony Richardson has struggled as he has, you can't just leave him out there. You lose the locker room, you lose belief. So that is the thought process. I would just say the returns on Flacco right now, at least since being named the starter, not because of injury. 272 against Buffalo, 179 a Sunday night prior against Minnesota. 2 touchdowns to 4 interceptions and another fumble on Sunday against the Bills. That's not exactly the results that Indianapolis is looking for.
No, but again, if they deviate from that now, what message does that send to the locker room? There's no way they're going to sell to the locker room, and it's apparent that the locker room doesn't believe that Richardson gives them the best chance to win, Ben. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. He'd be under center. But the reality is you can't complete 40% of your passes in the NFL and think you're an NFL quarterback. You're not. So Flacco does. It's the best option they have. And you can't sell to the locker room. Now you're going to go back to the development idea and, hey, this is a lost season, so whatever happens, happens. They got to stick with Flacco until the point where there's no longer a chance they make the playoffs. Then they can go back to Richardson.
Yeah, and that might be coming. But again, the AFC is not overly competitive this year. Indianapolis at 4-6 still believes they have a shot of being a postseason team. Joe Flacco did fill in for the injured AR 3 times at the end of September into early October. 2 starts and then a majority of a win against the Pittsburgh Steelers, handing the Steelers their first loss at the time. In that 3-game span, 7 touchdowns to only 1 INT. That is the good Joe Flacco that has resurrected his career and seasons for teams like he did last year, of course, leading Cleveland to 11 wins and a playoff berth. 3.5-point dog on the road in New York. The Colts have not covered in their last 2 games with Flacco as the starter. But, Joe, before that, they were 5-0 ATS as an underdog. I'll just tell you early, I'll take the 3 and a hook against a New York Jets team in MetLife, expected to win yet another football game as a favorite, where they have lost 4 of 7 games straight up as the favorite side this year.
I don't know how anybody looks at the Jets and wants to lay anything with them except lay down and just, and die at this point here, Ben, because just burn your money before you start laying points with the Jets, because you have no idea which Jets team is going to show up, unfortunately. If the Jets' good defense shows up, not a great matchup for Flacco, right? We just saw this here with Minnesota, with what they did to him. We just saw what Buffalo's defense did to him. But if the Jets defense that shows up that we just saw against Arizona, Indy wins by 1 million. So it's good luck trying to figure those out. I have no idea with them anymore.
We shall see. Matt Eberflus yesterday, or Matt Eberfluser, as I call him here on the early line, said the team will not change quarterbacks. No duh. And Caleb Williams will remain the starter. Shut up, Eberflus. Pack your bags and leave Chicago. Go ahead. Go.
I mean, Ben, you got to tell me here. What you thought that keeping Eberflus, swapping out OCs, bringing in Shane Waldron, and this starts from the top, by the way. I don't necessarily blame Eber. It wasn't like he gave himself his own contract extension, right? You got to start looking at the top with the GM on the way down and going, what are you doing? Mitch Trubisky, Fields, now Caleb Williams. The Chicago Bears are the last organization you ever want developing a quarterback. You know what they should have gone with? A Joe Flacco. That's what they should have gone with, and worried about building up other parts of this team, because developing a quarterback is not the Chicago Bears' strong suit. It never has been, Ben. Going back how long now? They've never developed quarterbacks here, and that's not changing with this regime right now.
Going back to the entire history of this franchise, one of the original founders of the NFL. Joe, the Chicago Bears have never in a single season had a 4,000-yard passer. Caleb Williams, rookie season passing yards prop, was 3,400 and a hook. Had he even flirted with going over that number, even if he was under by about 50 to 75 yards, it would have been the 5th most passing yards in a single season in the history of the Bears franchise. This is not Caleb's fault. This is going to be cast onto him in what a precarious and unfortunate scenario that he is in. Unless the McCaskey family or Kevin Warren or whoever is going to make the call to fire Eberflus and or Shane Waldron, and should be the answer, things are only going to get worse immediately. And the Bears are a 6.5-point home underdog against the Packers. Maybe getting spanked by the Packers in your own home stadium and seeing all the fans leave by the time there's 7 minutes remaining in the first quarter will be enough of a motivation to make that decision. I would call it a difficult decision. It's not. Apparently, it's a difficult decision on what the Giants are going to do with their starting quarterback moving forward the remainder of this year. The G-men back from Munich. They have a bye in Week 11. Brian Daboll was asked if Daniel Jones will still be the starting quarterback. Did not say yes, only that they are, quote, evaluating things.
Yeah, no, what he meant to say is we're evaluating next year's draft to try and find his replacement. But I think he fell short of actually explaining all of that. So, they're looking at everything, including the draft. That's exactly what they're doing.
And Brian Daboll is looking at everything, trying to keep his job along with his buddy Joe Shane, because that's his biggest concern more around the NFL now. Woo.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. Brady, I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The Seahawks, I expected a bounce back after that poor performance against Buffalo the week before. They took the Rams right down to the wire.
The Cardinals are the top spot at the that's not going to hold. Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are not going to win this division, but they are 5-4. After that, you've got the Rams, the Niners, each 4-4. The Niners, God willing, man. I mean, if Christian McCaffrey ever does come back.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Grandma Bear, who owns the football team, probably comes in, gives a little, oh, man, you're such a good little boy out there. Congratulations, the way you coach this football team. I'm never going to fire you.
Totally, I missed you pinching your own cheek as I was looking down and did not know we were getting.
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there with that guy named Ben. Like, that's what your grandma would do to you when you goes here on Thanksgiving or Christmas,
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the Early Line on SportsGrid. 1 week in the NFL ends. You look forward to the next weekend or perhaps the remainder of this season. How much season does remain, in fact, for the Dallas Cowboys at 3-6 in a tailspin with their $60 million quarterback, Dak Prescott, the highest paid player in the history of the NFL, more than likely on the shelf for the rest of this season. And as the Cowboys got beat bad once again by the Philadelphia Eagles at home, 34-6 on Sunday. The Cowboys now 0-4, both straight up and against the number at the Star this year. That led to comments about the sun breaking into the stadium. Jerry Jones saying, "Shut up about the sun," and many other comments. Not an easy day for the Dallas Cowboys on Monday to address all of that and being blown out by nearly 30 points at home. Micah Parsons on his podcast tried to clarify his original comments about Mike McCarthy. Here are the original comments, just so we know. Quote, this is what Micah said in the game. Quote, "That's above my pay grade, whether Mike is coaching again next year. Coaching, Mike can leave and go wherever he wants. Guys I kind of feel bad for are Zach Martin and guys who might be on their last year or on their way out." So again, not the best comments to air out that laundry in public. And then Micah Parsons tried to clarify those comments, Joe, on his own podcast. Quote, "I never once threw or even intended to throw Mike McCarthy under the bus. Whether your intention was that or not, you did." McCarthy met with the media on Monday and shared that he and Micah had a conversation because any time that things that should be handled internally in the locker room, in the facility, get out to the public, you got to address it head on.
Dude, I'm sorry, but this just goes to show you the total dysfunction of Dallas. Yeah. Would Bill Belichick allow some dude to have a podcast that's only played in 3 of the Week 11 games that we've already had now? We're heading into Week 11, Micah Parsons, and you have something to say about a team you have not participated with here except for what? 3 games, Ben? He's made himself available for? And yet you are opening your mouth and talking about things on a podcast that should only be left in a locker room here. So this whole new generation of the podcast bros in the locker room now, speaking and talking and trying to fill airtime, Not great, Ben. It's not great. It usually leads to dysfunction.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, head coaches that know what they're doing would never tolerate it. But Mike McCarthy is not one of those guys.
And again, he was already on the warmest seat, perhaps in the history of the NFL entering this year after another Dallas disaster in the postseason, being beat big at home in Super Wildcard Weekend, one and done again by the Green Bay Packers. Jerry Jones brought him back, but did not give him a lot of confidence by extending his contract. He is basically a lame duck head coach. He is going to be gone. It's just a matter of not if, but when. Might it happen during the regular season? That, I guess, remains to be seen. We'll debate in our second hour. And, Joe, to your point, this time of players in the media while still playing. Listen, content's awesome, right? To get the player perspective and maybe a peek behind the curtain is cool, I guess, on what is actually going on. But if things are bad, this is the exact opposite of what you want. And boy, oh boy, are things bad. Elsewhere for Dallas, Dak Prescott met with a specialist in New York. That miraculous second opinion that could save his season. We heard from the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chow, yesterday. It's not going to happen. So Cooper Rush will be the starter more than likely, at least for another week, as the Cowboys will be in prime time once again, Joe, in Week 11 on Monday night as they host the Houston Texans in the Lone Star Showdown. Houston 7.5-point road favorite in Dallas.
Yeah. It's not going to go well because there's unfortunately a ton of other issues that are standing in the way of this team, right? Yet new defensive coordinator hasn't lived up to standards. The defense and granted they were given a lot of challenges early with the injuries to their edge rushers and everything else. But I mean, Ben, they're not even competitive in these games, whether Dak Prescott was there or not. I mean, they're getting absolutely ripped. So from the top down, this is not a well-constructed football team, nor is it a very well-coached football team. So changes are coming for Dallas.
Some reason the odds makers at FanDuel, because of the current status of the Dallas Cowboys and the scenario of which they find themselves, maybe they're holding on for that second opinion for Dak Prescott's severely injured hamstring. There's no playoff price. There's no updated win total. But what I can tell you is it's a long way from what preseason expectation was thought to be for the boys. Again, they had won the NFC East last year, 2 of the last 3 seasons. And, Joe, I have said this countless times ad nauseum here on the early line. I wouldn't bet the Dallas Cowboys to win the NFC Championship or a Super Bowl based on their playoff track record the last 3 decades with my worst enemy's money. I wouldn't even do that to that hard-earned wage. But the thing we always give the Cowboys credit for is regular season success. Going over 9.5 is something they had done for 3 consecutive years. Not this season, not going to happen. And frankly, Joe, I'm not sure how many more wins outside of 3 Dallas is going to garner the rest of this season.
It's very tough. I mean, they are, I believe now, the only team in NFL history to trail by at least 20 points in 5 consecutive home games. 5 in Dallas, Ben, in Dallas, a team that has always had and enjoyed one of the best home field advantages in all of the NFL. Yeah, the idea that any of this road or home is going to get better is crazy. I wouldn't be shocked if secretly the tank is on here, Ben, for the Dallas Cowboys.
And, Joe, as it should be, really, when you think about it, right? They need to be focused on the future. Jerry Jones has another large, outstanding contract that will have to be met this offseason. It is the podcast host, Micah Parsons. Mike McCarthy will be gone. They're going to have to find a new head coach. Dallas's eyes are on 2025 and beyond. Joe, we'll see if the odds makers catch up. But the Cowboys are going to be an underdog more than likely in a good majority of the remaining games. Just 12-16 ATS as a dog under McCarthy. NBA news, a recap from last night next.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. Ready? I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The Seahawks, I expected a bounce back after that poor performance against Buffalo the week before. They took the Rams right down to the wire.
The Cardinals are the top spot at the that's not going to hold. Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are not going to win this division, but they are 5-4. After that, you've got the Rams, the Niners, each 4-4. The Niners, God willing, man. I mean, if Christian McCaffrey ever does come back.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Grandma Bear, who owns the football team, probably comes in, gives a little, oh, man, you're such a good little boy out there. Congratulations, the way you coach this football team. I'm never going to fire you.
Totally, I missed you pinching your own cheek as I was looking down and did not know we were getting.
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there with that guy named Ben. Like, that's what your grandma would do to you when you go see her on Thanksgiving or Christmas,
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Around the association and some more hardwood action in college basketball to tip off the second full week of this 2024-25 season. The best team in the NBA continues to be the best and perfect at that. The Cleveland Cavaliers are now 12-0 after a 6-point win yesterday in the Windy City against the Chicago Bulls. Now, the Cavaliers are 12-0. Last night, an 8-point favorite. They did not cover the number, but they have covered in 8 of 12 games. They have scored at least 110 points in 11 of those 12 victories. And more than anything, though, Joe, they are perfect, unblemished, undefeated at 12-0 with first-year head coach in the land, Kenny Atkinson. The Cavaliers, the lone undefeated team remaining in the NBA.
Yeah, and impressively, too, Ben. I mean, Donovan Mitchell, I think, had a season high 36. He's been a PRA machine. Mobley has been a double-double machine. Garland also, I think, dropped 17 last night. So they're getting contributions up and down the starting rotation, not to mention the bench players here. This is a impressive effort here now for the Cavs. But like you said earlier, okay, great. But you've always been a good regular season team, have they not been? The question, and this season will all depend on what happens come June. That's the only thing that's going to matter with Cleveland. But great start to the season. If they can stay healthy, they're going to wrap up a ton of wins this year.
Yeah, absolutely so, Joe. They have been a good regular season team. They have been bounced, though, in the postseason the last few years rather abruptly with J.B. Bickerstaff, new head coach, and Kenny Atkinson, and, of course, the Cavs off to a great start this season. Total last night did stay under, despite both teams scoring 113-plus. It was 237, just the fourth under in those 12 wins for the Cavaliers this season. First game for OKC without Chet Holmgren and a lot of scoring last night in Oklahoma City. The Thunder do win 134-128 against L.A. The Clippers do cover as a slight 6.5-point road dog, courtesy of the hook. 218 and a hook was the total. It's guys over. No Chet Holmgren. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander steps up in a large way. In fact, a career best way. His career high, 45 points to lead the Thunder to a victory.
Yeah, 13 of 21 from the field, 15 of 16 from the free throw line here. But two totally different teams now you're going to see. They say Chet is out, 8 weeks, so at least a couple of months.
Yeah.
OKC, prior to that going out, was the number 1 rated defensive team in the NBA. Good luck trying to score 100 points on them, but now they have to play totally different. They got to go smaller. They're going to go more up-tempo. There are going to be a lot more points in OKC games than what we got so far this season because that defense looks totally different now.
Yeah, absolutely so. Chet Holmgren, the anchor of that defense, no longer there. The Clippers, by the way, last night, just when you look at where their schedule has been, I'm trying to track down the numbers, just their 4th game on the road. They opened up at home in the new Intuit Dome 7 times in their opening 10 games. They had one outright as an underdog in their first 3 road trips. Last night they cover, so they're a perfect 4-0 ATS on the road this year. Notable Monday college basketball scores with a bunch of ranked teams in action. Number 2, Alabama against Will Wade's McNeese State team out of the Southland, one of the better mid-majors this year. McNeese State did lose by 8, but they cover as a 17.5-point underdog. Total of 167.5 stays well under. Iowa State, a great defensive team. Purdue holds on against Yale. The Bulldogs, a tournament team last year, covering as a 14.5-point dog. Marquette got tested by Central Michigan. And Joe, Florida last night beats Grambling big by 24. They closed as a 25.5-point favorite. Of course, their head coach for the Gators, Todd Golden, under an investigation and inquiry on campus due to multiple Title IX violations. He was the head coach last night for Florida's victory.
Yeah, well, kudos, but that's just a distraction Florida did not want to have here at all this season. We'll see where that goes. But by the way, kudos to Rutgers, but St. Peter's, remember when they were just an automatic underplay over the last couple of years? Apparently not anymore because all they do is play overs and score points. So different St. Peter's team so far this year, even though they got boat raced by Rutgers.
That game was close, down to a single digit in the final 4 minutes. St. Peter's covering against both Seton Hall and Rutgers, the pride of the Garden State. Never easy. Hour number 2 is up next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Are they definitely done with Daniel Jones from this point? And any shot that Dable is off the sidelines, meaning he gets fired before next season?
They have a general manager in Joe Shane. Every big move has to get approval by ownership. So look, the bottom line is they don't know who their future quarterback is past this season. Tommy DeVito is clearly not the answer. They don't have it. Drew Lock's not the answer.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Grandma Bear, who owns the football team, probably comes in, gives a little, oh, man, you're such a good little boy out there. Congratulations, the way you coach this football team. I'm never going to fire you.
Totally, I missed you pinching your own cheek as I was looking down and did not know we were getting.
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there with that guy named Ben. Like, that's what your grandma would do to you when you go see her on Thanksgiving or Christmas,
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.